Hey everybody, this is Perch. All right, I want to talk about this thread that a couple of you forwarded to me on Twitter. Now, in this instance, I'm not going to show art from the thread. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I should probably reach out to the artist, but I don't want to make it about the person involved because this is a more broad story. I want to talk about this more from a broad perspective as opposed to the specific thread. But I will give attribution to where it began from. So that's if you want to go check out the Twitter handle, it's at Alice underscore Rovai. That's Rovai. I would ask you, if you disagree with the person's perspective or any of that, I'm not giving you this handle so you can go just shit on the person or harass them. Just be a kind, normal human being and just move on. But I think they're basically this artist, and this artist does have a Patreon, by the way. So as a plug for creators, you go to patreon.com, same name, Alice, no underscore, Alice Rovai, all one word. So you can go support the artist there. But they are, nice cartoonish work. I'll very briefly state, the use of line art, the simplicity of the drawings, the kind of the way the characters are put together. It's cartoonish. It looks good. When I say cartoonish, I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, it's light animation style. It's got good tone work and good stuff. So all good. But anyway, the thread in question that a number of you messaged me about is titled "How I Got Replaced with AI," and the AI is crossed out and says "by a friend." So how I got replaced by and the friends in quotes. How I got replaced by a friend. And this thread is really about a artist who is trying to figure out their way, young, doing a bunch of work for free, trying to get their name out there, trying to figure out the ropes, get the right networking and all the rest, and then does a lot of work. Basically, I'm paraphrasing for the interest of talking about this as a broader topic, but go check out the original thing if you want to actually get the details. But basically, did a bunch of work. The project didn't really go anywhere. And then sometime later, the project did when she got back in touch with her collaborator, and her collaborator is like, "Oh, hey, good news. I went ahead and just used AI and got the whole thing taken care of. In effect, I don't need you. AI did it. And, see ya," kind of thing. And so, why the thread is interesting here, and why I think it's worth talking about is that we hear a lot about AI. AI is going to replace artists, and there's very passionate people about AI. When I say passion, I mean the very word kind of inflames and triggers people to an extreme degree. And this thread is taking more thought to it than that, which I appreciate because I this is the conversation I want to have on it is really, AI is a tool. A tool is used by people. I say this to people who are engineers all the time. I've got a lot of software engineers who are like, well, what if the AI writes the code instead of me? It's like, well, it is inevitable that AI is going to write some of the code in the future. That is going to happen. But developers are going to be writing the prompts, they're going to be checking the code, they're going to be doing the high level architecture. There's still going to be engineers. AI is not going to replace engineers, but it will change engineers in much the same way that other industries have changed. And when I say this, by the way, I'm not making a judgment call about is this good, is this bad, is it sad, is it disrupting people's lives? It is disrupting people's lives. Whether you're in code, whether you're in art, whether you're in, anything. It is definitely going to disrupt people's lives, but this is not unique, meaning we deal with disruption all the time. Ask a cab driver how they feel about the disruption of Uber. There's a lot of very chatty people in the New York and LA area that are complaining about AI and disruption and changing people's jobs, but, take Uber everywhere and talk about how much better it is than an old yellow cab. Well, that disrupted people's work. And guess what? They are also using AI at Uber pretty heavily. So just saying, disruption is all around us. You can't really escape it. The question is, what do you want to do with it? And so, again, go read the thread with this person. But it brings up a more interesting point because, buried inside this thing is this story of somebody who basically was new in their career, basically wanted to get art, some art there. And I think this is the line that I think is often debated inside of art communities. It said, I was younger and excited. So even if no payment was included, I did it. It was an opportunity. And I think this is a challenge. What I also really liked about this thread is kind of the moral at the end of the story. It says, wait here, I want to get this. It says, so yes, that's it. This is at the conclusion of the story where basically this artist got screwed over to some extent. Um, the screwing over didn't come because of the AI. The AI wound up being a tool that the person used, but the way I would, and I'm speculating here, I don't, personally know the people involved, but the problem here is that this artist worked with a collaborator. The collaborator was making lots of implied promises about how the project was going to go. It was a creative, juncture between the two of them. And then one day said, yeah, I basically cut you out and I replaced you with a robot that allows me to do my job easier. I don't need a collaboration. It could be a job, it could be a project of one. And yes, AI enables that. But if there was no AI, the ethics of the other person, the ethics of the person who kind of screwed him over, yeah, I mean, am I supposed to believe that this person wouldn't have, if a cheaper artist came along or if an outsourced illustrator from South America came along, we'll come more to that in a moment. Do I believe that the person would have gotten screwed over in a different way? Yeah. Yeah. Because part of the moral of the story is the collaborator, in this case, not the artist, but the writer, the person who's involved in this was a dick. I don't know them, but I can speak kind of generically. If you're the type of person who's going to work with somebody else, who's going to put the effort in, invest in, in somebody's idea, share ideas, and then one day you decide to proceed forward, and you had a choice. You had a choice of picking up the phone or texting. This crazy thing about 2025, and it has been this way for some time. It is easy to get hold of people. There are literally lots of ways. And if there's one thing about creators, no offense intended to all of you, mails or DMs or texts talking about work and payment, they tend to rise to the top. People pay attention to those. Those get attention. So it's not like it's 1970 and you're gonna have to figure out where Walt Simonson in the studio is and then kind of pin a missive on a piece of paper and hope that the post office delivers it in 2 weeks from your flat in London. Like it communication happens instantly. So this person made a choice of continuing on with the work and not bothering to get in touch with the original collaborator, and instead went to AI. And guess what? AI is difficult, meaning if you've never used it before, you've got to invest some time into figuring out how the prompts work, putting in a credit card so you can pay it, at some point, because you got to get work out of it. I mean, there's effort involved, a lot more effort than texting somebody. So I do appreciate that, a lot of people who are responding to this thread, and some of the people who said it to me, is like, don't you think this is a reason that AI is bad? And it's like, I think you missed the big point of the story, because the person writes toward the end, it says, so yes, that's it. A do not give your time and drawings away lesson? I don't know. I was young and I needed to find a starting point. And honestly, I trusted that person to a point a few days ago. I was going to give her my experience and time again. All of that, I mean, really kind of puts the highlight on where the problem is. And that is, there are shitty people out there. And again, I don't know that maybe this is truly a delightful person, some, one little mistake in life. You can't judge people off of somebody you don't even know, but I can judge the actions. And the actions are, this is a shitty thing to do to somebody. AI be damned. For what it's worth, this may seem like a bit of a stretch, but once upon a time, there were lots of artists in the US and in the UK who would do comic books for Marvel and DC. And Marvel took a deliberate strategy to go get artists in Argentina and cheaper locations. A lot of that art was not as good. And a lot of the different parts of the job, be it inking, coloring, lettering, started to get outsourced overseas. Now, am I saying that, people who are not American can't do comics? Of course not. But the impetus behind this was not, hey, let's get some different cultural views on material. It was, hey, this is half the cost. And so that is kind of a shitty thing to do. I don't think that's much different from somebody saying, hey, I'm going to just do this part of the job using AI. It's being done for the same reason, cost. It's saying, I don't want to pay, it used to cost me $50 to do this. I can, get rid of one of the jobs and just use AI and pay it nothing, or pay it, pennies compared to what I was paying a human being. And that's just what we're going to do now. That's it's an evolution from the idea of saying, I don't want to pay, a good colorist here in the US, $50 a page. So, I'm gonna outsource it to somebody in Mexico who will do it for $5. I mean, it's all the same thing. AI is a more precise, powerful tool that doesn't talk back, doesn't need food, and as a result, it becomes popular. That's why it's a disruptor. It will be a disruptor. But what really kind of struck me about the story, and why it kind of stayed in my head through the day, was one, I think it laid out pretty well a dynamic that a lot of artists and writers have. You do a collaboration, you get with the wrong person who doesn't communicate, and one day you get fucked over. And it's a very easy thing to fall into, particularly from people early in their careers, because, like the woman said in her strip there, um, you're young, you need the exposure, you need the networking. And quite frankly, and I know this is probably a very polarizing, tough thing to hear. Because I have worked with artists and I've been involved in projects where the artist's like, I'm not going to do anything unless you pay me. I won't even have this conversation. If we're on this conversation, we're on the clock. And they get very, I would say, transactional, but, and I apologize about, describe it this way, but frankly, just very harsh, very shitty about the whole thing. You need to pay me. And on one hand, these people are standing up to their rights. On the other hand, particularly if they're early in their career, I'm just going to tell you the conclusion of that story. And the conclusion of that story is, you're like, this person's too hard to work with. I'm going to find somebody else. And they do. They do all the time. People aren't going to work with somebody who acts like they're entitled. And the shitty part is, that's a kind of a lousy word to use for this situation. People deserve to get paid for what they do. But it also has to be a collaboration. It has to be a joint effort. If you're early in your career, you don't have a lot of negotiating power. You don't have a network. You are trying to get exposure. And exposure is worth money. The challenge is how much of that to give away of yourself. Because there are limits. If you give away too much, you're going to find yourself in the process where you're just always working for free. But on the other hand, if you stand up for, like, I need to be paid, rates for everything that I do and any conversation I have, nobody's going to work with you because you're just too difficult to work with. That's the balance you have to strike. And it's a very, very difficult one. And particularly for people who do in a career, it's a place where people get taken advantage of all the time. And so there is the trick to it is this, the advice I would give people. And, this is an N of one, giving some people advice. Every situation is different. The dynamics are different. The people are different. But like the person who wrote this thread, a lot of it comes down to trust. The question you have to ask yourself is, do I trust this person? And just know going in, you're not going to bat 1,000. You're going to get some people who appear trustworthy, seem good, say the right things, vote the way you do, whatever it is. And they're going to screw you over, because as it turns out, people who screw other people over with projects, it transcends race, gender, politics, sexuality, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't really matter. There's people who will fuck you over of all walks of life. There is nothing like a completely true, community of people who just always look out for each other. And there's never a bad apple in there. There's always a bad apple in everything. And so you do have to be careful a little bit about who you trust, but you are going to be eventually getting to a place where you have to take a trust fall and hope that the person that you're working with and potentially giving some of your work and your time and your effort and your thoughts away for free is not going to turn around and fuck you over. But that's it. That's tough. That's not a clean line. And so the trick I think is to look out for some of the signs. You do need one thing I would advise every kind of new incoming artist is if you're not trading for money, meaning you have no name, you want to get some exposure out there. So you're going to give away some work for free or for very cheap. That's a reasonable thing to do, but you should think, at least in your mind, what am I getting in return? And the challenge with exposure is nebulous and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Yeah, you could get exposure. You could also not get exposure. You don't know. The person's not on the hook for anything. So what can you put the person on the hook for? And ideas in that area are things like, well, this is going to sound silly, but a big one and one that helps is communication. If you're going to do work for somebody for free, establish how you're going to get communicated to, how status is going to get to you, how updates are going to come to you. Make sure your name is on it. The big red flag I've always seen for creators is if you're doing something for free for exposure and the person you're doing it for doesn't allow you to put your name on it. Well, okay, let's think about that for a moment. First of all, how are you getting exposure again? Your name's not on it. I mean, look, that sounds really simple and really dim, but if you don't have credit for the work, then your hope of exposure now completely is a trust fall of the person asking you for it, that they're going to, self volunteer that you did this work. I'm just telling you, that's a dangerous place to be. And I wouldn't count on it. The other, so communication and credit are really important things. And in general, neither one sounds particularly, douchey when you ask for it. Like I want to make sure that, if I'm doing this, I'm credited. Okay. I mean, that's a reasonable ask. I just want to make sure that if I'm doing this, that, you're going to keep in touch with me and, or you're going to, I'm going to be brought along on this journey, whatever it is. And you can couch this by the way of saying, I'm trying to learn the industry. I'm trying to learn how a lot of stuff works. I'm trying to learn, how to best represent myself. And, I recognize I'm new. I'm recognize that I don't have a lot of experience. So therefore I'm willing to give a lot of this work away for low cost or for free, but I'm doing this so I can get exposure and learn. So for the learning part, I want to be, CC'd on the emails. I want to be included on the communication. I want to be able to see how this works. Keep in mind, there's two advantages to taking that approach. Number one is, yeah, you do learn. I mean, one of the biggest problems I see from a lot of new artists and new creators is that they really don't know how the business works. Their understanding of how it works comes from like a handful of close friends on Twitter, and that's not a, I mean that's misleading, let's say at best. But seeing the real communication, seeing how this stuff goes back and forth, yeah, there's a lot of good learning you can do from that. So it's worthwhile. The other thing, bluntly, is it creates a paper trail. So in the future, if somebody does try and fuck you over and you're CC'd, you're credited, you're on all this communication, it just makes it a lot harder for them to do that. And they will think twice about it. Again, I like I said, I am going to reach out to this person and just say, hey, I'd like to tell your story. I have no idea about her. I don't know what she does, what circle she runs in, anything else. I don't know if somebody who's like, oh yeah, Perch, love him, or Perch is the devil. I mean, I don't know, does she hang out on Reddit? Probably. If she does, I'm probably screwed. But anyway, I'm going to reach out because I think it's a good story. I also like the fairness in which she described it. She went through, she talked about the mistakes she made. She talked about the role of AI. She talked about the role of kind of this dishonest friend who, did her dirty. And I just like seeing all sides of that. I'm a bit disappointed in the responses that people didn't pick up on, and it wasn't a subtle point she was making. It was in the title of the thread, but still, I think it's good, and I think more artists, more creatives can learn from this stuff because it's not easy to navigate. It just is not. So, anyway, there you go. I think it's a worthwhile story, and I'll let you know if I get in touch with her. But anyway. Solid read. Good to see somebody else's perspective, and a shame that this kind of thing happens. But thanks for listening.